The divorce papers landed on Claire Morrison's hospital blanket before her husband said hello. She couldn't move. 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, a fractured pelvis. She had been lying in this bed at St. Luke's Hospital for 3 days, waiting for Michael to hold her hand, waiting for him to tell her everything would be okay, waiting for the man she had loved for 12 years to show up and be her husband. Instead, he brought paperwork. Michael stood at the foot of her bed in a Brooks Brothers charcoal suit. His tie was immaculate. His Allen Edmonds shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He looked like he was closing a business deal, not visiting his injured wife. The manila envelope hit the white blanket with a soft thud that somehow felt louder than it should have been. Sign while you're still in good spirits from the medication. His voice carried that calm, measured tone he used in boardroom presentations. Then he checked his Rolex. Once, twice, 3 times in 8 minutes. Like she was just another appointment on his calendar running over its allotted slot. Claire tried to sit up. Pain exploded through her ribcage, white-hot and merciless. She gasped and fell back against the pillows. The morphine drip clicked, releasing another dose into her veins, but it wasn't enough to touch this particular agony. "Michael." Her voice came out hoarse, cracked from disuse and the breathing tube they'd removed yesterday. "What are you talking about?" He pulled a chair close to the bed. Not to comfort her, to explain. He sat down and crossed his legs like they were having a casual conversation over coffee at the Capitol Grill, not discussing the end of their marriage while she lay broken and drugged. "I've already moved my things out of the house." The words came out rehearsed, practiced in front of a mirror somewhere. "I'm staying at the Riverside Hotel until I find a permanent place. My lawyer has flagged all the relevant sections in the paperwork. You should sign while the medication keeps you comfortable. Less stressful that way." Claire laughed. The sound startled her, a morphine-addled, disbelieving laugh that made her broken ribs scream in protest. The heart monitor beeped faster. Somewhere down the hall, a nurse's station phone rang twice and went silent. "You're joking." She searched his face for any hint of warmth, any trace of the man who'd promised in sickness and in health. This is some kind of sick joke. But then she looked at his eyes. Really looked. Those cold blue eyes that used to soften when he looked at her, that used to crinkle at the corners when he smiled. Now they were flat. Assessing. The eyes of a CFO calculating the most efficient path to a desired outcome. He was serious. He had been waiting for this moment. He had calculated this timing with the precision he brought to quarterly earnings reports and 5-year financial projections. "We've been married for 12 years. Her voice cracked on the number. 12 years, 12 Christmases, 12 anniversaries, 4,380 days of trying to be enough. Exactly, 12 years is long enough to know when something isn't working. He uncrossed his legs, recrossed them the other way, a tell she'd learned to read over a decade of marriage. He was uncomfortable but committed to his course of action. "I'll give you time to read through everything. My lawyer needs the signed papers by Friday. That gives you 3 days. I think that's more than fair." Fair. He thought abandoning his injured wife and demanding a divorce while she couldn't even walk to the bathroom was fair. Michael stood up. He brushed invisible lint from his perfectly pressed pants. He straightened his tie. He looked at her one more time with those cold eyes that used to look at her with something she'd convinced herself was love. "I'll be in touch." 4 words. Or 12 years reduced to 4 words and a manila envelope. The door clicked shut behind him. The sound echoed in the sterile room like a gunshot, final and irreversible. Claire stared at the envelope. She stared at the wilting flowers on the bedside table, a generic bouquet from the hospital gift shop with a card that said, "Thinking of you. Get well soon." No signature. No promise to visit. Just flowers that were already starting to die. She stared at the ceiling tiles she had memorized over the past 72 hours. 347 tiles in a room, meant for healing now, a room where her marriage had just flatlined. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table. She reached for it slowly, every movement sending pain radiating through her broken body like cracks spreading through ice. The screen showed an unknown number, the same number that had called 6 times this week. She had ignored it every time, assuming it was spam, another robocall about her car's extended warranty or a cruise she'd never take. This time there was a voicemail. The transcription appeared on her screen, words fragmenting as the automated system tried to make sense of an urgent voice. "Claire, this is urgent. I know what your husband is planning. I know because I'm the one who—" The message cut off mid-sentence. Claire stared at the screen. Her heart rate spiked. The monitor beeped faster, a staccato rhythm that matched her rising panic. A nurse appeared in the doorway, young and concerned, wearing scrubs covered in cartoon cats. "Mrs. Morrison, is everything all right? Your readings just spiked." "I'm fine." The lie came automatically, smooth and practiced after years of saying she was fine when she wasn't, years of pretending everything was okay when it was slowly crumbling. "Just a bad dream." The nurse checked her vitals, adjusted her medication, fluffed her pillow with practiced efficiency. Her name tag read Jessica, and she smelled like hand sanitizer and something floral, maybe lavender. "Your husband was here earlier. He didn't stay long. Is he coming back?" Claire looked at the divorce papers on her blanket. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Irreconcilable differences. Division of assets. Legal language for the death of everything she'd built. "No, I don't think he is." When the nurse left, the room fell silent again. Just the hum of fluorescent lights, the beep of the heart monitor, the click of the morphine drip. Claire picked up the envelope with trembling fingers. She pulled out the stack of papers. Page after page of legal language, terms and conditions for ending a life together. She found the page with a sticky note, an arrow in Michael's neat handwriting pointing to a signature line. "Sign here," written with the same pen he'd used to sign birthday cards and anniversary notes and the mortgage on their house. Claire thought about their wedding day. The church in downtown Chicago, filled with white roses and promises. Michael's vows spoken in a voice thick with emotion she'd believed was real. In sickness and in health. For richer or for poorer. Until death do us part. Apparently sickness changed the terms of the agreement. Apparently her broken body was enough to void a contract written before God and 200 witnesses. The unknown number called again. Claire watched the phone ring. 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Then it went to voicemail. She waited, holding her breath despite the pain it caused. 30 seconds later, the notification appeared. Another message. She pressed play. "Claire, please don't hang up. This is your father." The phone slipped from her hand. It clattered onto the hospital blanket, the voice still speaking, tiny and distant. Claire's vision tunneled. Her father, Henry Sullivan, a name she hadn't spoken in 15 years, not since her mother's funeral, not since she'd discovered the truth about money and lies and choices that had cost her mother everything. She picked up the phone with numb fingers. "I know what Michael is planning. I know because 6 months ago I bought his company." Henry's voice was older than she remembered, rougher like gravel ground under years of regret. "Morrison Tech. I own the controlling interest through a shell corporation. Michael doesn't know. No one knows. But I know everything he's been doing, Claire. Every dollar he's stolen. Every lie he's told. And I can help you, if you'll let me." The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. Her estranged father, the man she'd sworn never to speak to again, claiming to own her husband's company. Claiming to have been watching. Claiming to know about stolen money and lies. "Why?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "Why would you do this? You haven't spoken to me in 15 years. You let Mom die. You let her die when you could have saved her. Why would you suddenly care about my marriage?" Silence on the other end. Not empty silence. Heavy silence weighted with things unsaid and years of distance. "I have cancer, Claire. Pancreatic. Stage 4. The doctors say I have perhaps a year, maybe less." His voice cracked on the word year. "I didn't want to die with you hating me, and I couldn't let him destroy you. Not like this. Not when I have the power to stop it." The phone fell again. This time Claire didn't pick it up. She could hear Henry's voice still speaking, distant and desperate, but the words blurred together. Her cheating husband wanted a divorce, her dying father wanted forgiveness, and she was trapped in a hospital bed, unable to run from either of them. The morphine pulled her towards sleep. She fought it, tried to think clearly, tried to make sense of what had happened, but the drugs were stronger than her will. Her last thought before unconsciousness took her was about Michael's face, the way he looked at her, or rather, the way he didn't look at her, like she was already gone, like she was already erased, like she had never mattered at all. Morning light hurt. Someone had opened the blinds. The sun streamed through the window like it didn't know her world had ended, like it didn't understand that everything was broken beyond repair. Claire was more alert today. The doctors had reduced her morphine dose. With clarity came the crushing weight of what had happened. Michael's words played on repeat in her mind, a loop she couldn't stop. This is the right time for both of us to move forward separately. I've already moved my things. Sign while you're still in good spirits. The cruelty of it, the calculated precision. He had waited until she was at her most vulnerable, until she could barely breathe, until she couldn't even stand on her own 2 feet. This wasn't the impulsive decision of a man who'd fallen out of love. This was strategy. "Girl, I am going to kill him." Claire turned her head. Nina Brooks stood in the doorway, 5'4" of righteous fury, her nursing scrubs wrinkled from a long shift, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun that had given up pretending to be professional. Her brown eyes blazed with the kind of anger that only a best friend of 22 years could muster. "Nina." Claire's voice was weak, but seeing her friend made something inside her chest unclench slightly. Nina stormed into the room. "The whole floor is talking. That smug piece of work came in here yesterday and handed you divorce papers while you're lying here with a collapsed lung, while you can barely move. I swear to God, Claire, I will find him and I will hurt him." "How did you know?" Claire tried to sit up slightly. Nina was there immediately, adjusting the bed, arranging pillows with the efficiency of someone who'd spent 15 years as a nurse. "Honey, this is a hospital. Everyone knows everything within 15 minutes. Jessica from 3rd floor told Ramirez from radiology, who told me during shift change." Nina pulled up a chair, sat down hard. "Tell me what happened. Every word he said." Claire told her. The manila envelope, the calm explanations, the watch checking, the Friday deadline. Nina's face grew darker with every sentence, a storm gathering behind her eyes. "That man is a snake, and I should have told you years ago." Claire's blood ran cold. "Told me what?" Nina hesitated. She looked at the door, then back at Claire. Something shifted in her expression, a decision made after long deliberation. "Honey, I've been biting my tongue for 3 years. That man has been cheating on you since before your hysterectomy." The room tilted. Claire gripped the bed rails with white knuckles, the plastic digging into her palms. "What?" "Sophie Barrett, junior executive at his company. I've seen them together, Claire. I have pictures." Nina pulled out her phone. She scrolled through her camera roll, then turned the screen toward Claire. Michael and a woman at a restaurant, their heads close together, his hand on her arm. The woman was younger, blonde, beautiful, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than Claire's entire wardrobe. Another photo. Michael's Tesla parked outside an apartment complex, the same woman walking toward it. Another, and another, and another. Dates spanning back 3 years, a careful documentation of betrayal. "Why didn't you tell me?" Claire could barely breathe. The pain in her chest had nothing to do with broken ribs now. "Because you weren't ready to hear it." Nina's voice softened, broke slightly. "Every time I tried to bring it up, you shut me down. You said Michael was working late. You said he was stressed. You said your marriage was going through a rough patch, but you'd work it out. I tried, Claire. I tried so many times. But you didn't want to see it." She was right. Claire had said all those things, had believed them, had wanted to believe them so badly that she'd ignored every warning sign, every late night at the office, every new cologne, every time Michael stopped touching her after the surgery. The hysterectomy, 2 years ago. March 2021. The emergency surgery that had taken away her ability to have children had taken away a piece of her she'd thought defined her worth. Michael had sent flowers to her hospital room then, too. The card had said, "We don't need children. We have each other." She had cried happy tears. She had believed him. She had thought his love was enough to fill the hollow space where her dreams of motherhood used to live. But he was already gone by then, already with someone else, someone younger, someone whole, someone who could give him things Claire no longer could. The hysterectomy was 2 years ago. Claire's voice came out flat, distant, like it belonged to someone else. "You're saying he started with her 3 years ago?" "Not 3 years of the affair, 3 years since I first saw them together." Nina pulled up more photos. "This is from September 2021, 6 months after your surgery. This is when I'm certain it became physical." Claire stared at the photos. Michael and Sophie at a bar laughing. Michael and Sophie outside a hotel. Michael and Sophie in his Tesla, his hand on her thigh. Each image was a knife, sharp and precise, cutting through 12 years of trust. "He told me I was beautiful when I came home from the hospital." The memory surfaced unbidden. Michael in their bedroom, her sitting on the edge of the bed, still sore, still healing. "He said the scars didn't matter. He said I was still everything he wanted." He was lying. Nina's hand found Claire's squeezed hard. "And I am so sorry. I am so sorry I didn't find a way to make you listen." Claire laughed. The sound was ugly, broken, nothing like the laugh that used to come easy. "Don't apologize. You tried. I just didn't want to see what I wasn't ready to see. I wanted to believe I was enough, that our marriage was real, that 12 years meant something." Her phone buzzed again, the same unknown number. Nina grabbed it before Claire could react. "Who is this?" Nina demanded into the phone, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "She's in the hospital, you vulture. Whatever you're selling, she doesn't want it." Silence. Then Nina's jaw dropped. Her eyes went wide. She looked at Claire with an expression somewhere between shock and disbelief. "Hold on." Nina's voice had changed completely, gone soft and careful. She handed the phone to Claire. It says he's your father." Claire took the phone with numb fingers. She pressed it to her ear. "Claire, please don't hang up." Henry Sullivan's voice, older and weaker than she remembered. 15 years could do that. 15 years and terminal cancer. "What do you want?" Ice in her voice. Ice in her chest. Ice where her heart used to be. "I know what your husband is planning. I know because I've been watching. I've taken steps, Claire. I've taken steps to protect you. I don't need your protection. I don't need anything from you." The words came out sharp, honed on 15 years of anger. "Please, just listen." A pause. A breath that sounded like it hurt. "Your husband has been moving money, marital assets, into offshore accounts for 2 years. He's planning to leave you with nothing, less than nothing. He's planning to leave you with his debt." Claire's heart pounded. The monitor beeped faster. Nina watched with wide eyes, leaning in to hear. "How do you know this?" Claire demanded. "Because 6 months ago I bought his company, Morrison Tech. I own the controlling interest through Sullivan Holdings. Michael doesn't know. No one knows. But I know everything he's been doing, every dollar he's stolen, every lie he's told. And I can help you, if you'll let me." The words were impossible. Her father, the man who'd let her mother die rather than use his hidden wealth for medical treatment, claiming to own Michael's company, claiming to have been watching her from the shadows like some kind of guardian angel. "You let Mom die." The accusation came out raw, ripped from a wound that had never healed. "You had money. You had millions. And you let her die from breast cancer because you couldn't be bothered to pay for treatment." "I have cancer too, Claire." His voice cracked completely. "Pancreatic. Stage 4. I have perhaps a year. And I did not want to die with you hating me. I also did not want to die knowing I let him destroy you when I had the power to stop it. Why should I believe anything you say? You've done nothing but lie for my entire life." "Because I have proof. Bank records, Wire transfers, offshore accounts in Nevada and Wyoming, accounts using your name, your social security number without your knowledge. If this fraud is discovered, you'll go to prison. He's been setting you up to take the fall for 2 years. The phone fell from Claire's hand. It clattered onto the hospital blanket. Henry's voice continued, tiny and distant, speaking words she couldn't process. Nina picked up the phone. She said something Claire couldn't hear, then ended the call. She set the phone down carefully, like it might explode. "What the hell was that?" Nina asked. "My father." Claire stared at the ceiling, counting tiles again. "The father who let my mother die. The father I haven't spoken to in 15 years. He says he bought Michael's company. He says Michael is stealing money and framing me. He says he can help." "Do you believe him?" "I don't know what I believe anymore." Claire closed her eyes. 3 days ago, I thought I had a husband who loved me. I thought I had a marriage. I thought I knew what my life was. Now I find out Michael's been cheating on me for 3 years. He's divorcing me while I'm in a hospital bed. And my dying father claims to have bought his company 6 months ago. Nothing makes sense. Nothing is real. Nina was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Here's what I know. Michael is a lying, cheating bastard who just proved he's capable of anything. Your father is calling you at the exact moment you need help, which is either the world's strangest coincidence or he's telling the truth. Either way, you need to know what's happening. You need information. I can't deal with this right now. I can barely breathe." "I know, honey, I know." Nina squeezed her hand again. "But Michael gave you a Friday deadline. That's 3 days from now. If you're going to fight this, you need to start now. And you need to know what you're fighting." Claire opened her eyes. She looked at her best friend, at the woman who'd been there through college and career changes, and her mother's funeral, and her wedding, and her hysterectomy. The woman who'd tried to warn her about Michael and been shut down because Claire wasn't ready to hear the truth. "I don't want his help. I don't want my father's money or his protection or his guilt-driven rescue mission." "Then don't take it. But at least hear what he has to say. At least find out what Michael is really doing. Knowledge is power, Claire. Right now you have no power because you don't know what's happening. Change that." The unknown number called again. Claire stared at it, watching it ring. 3 times. 4 times. Nina didn't move, didn't push, just sat there holding her hand. On the 5th ring, Claire picked up. "I'm listening." The next morning, a man Claire didn't recognize walked into her hospital room. He wore an expensive gray suit that hung perfectly on his lean frame. He carried a leather briefcase, worn soft with age and use. He introduced himself as Thomas Reed, attorney at law, with a firm handshake and eyes that assessed everything in one sweep. "I work for your father. He asked me to bring you some documents and some explanations." Thomas set the briefcase on the chair Nina had occupied yesterday. "May I?" Claire's first instinct was to throw him out, to scream at him to leave, but something stopped her. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the hollow feeling that her entire life had just shattered. Maybe she just needed answers, even if they came from the last person she wanted to owe. "Talk." Thomas opened his briefcase. He pulled out a folder thick with papers, edges neat and organized. 6 months ago, your father acquired a controlling interest in Morrison Tech. That's your husband's company. He did this through a shell corporation called Sullivan Holdings. The acquisition was entirely legal and entirely secret. The board voted to accept the offer based on the strength of the financial proposal, not knowing the identity of the real buyer. Why would he buy Michael's company? Because 3 years ago your father hired private investigators to keep an eye on you from a distance. Thomas's voice was professional, measured, but something in his eyes softened. He wanted to know you were safe, that you were happy. He discovered you were neither. 3 years. The same amount of time Michael had been with Sophie. The same amount of time Claire had been telling herself everything was fine while her world slowly rotted from the inside. The investigators found evidence of your husband's infidelity. They also found evidence of financial misconduct. Your husband has been embezzling from his own company. Small amounts at first, then larger. He's been hiding the money in shell corporations and trust accounts across multiple states: Nevada, Wyoming, Delaware. Accounts he set up using your name, your social security number without your knowledge. Claire felt sick. The morphine didn't help this time. My name. If the embezzlement is discovered, you would be implicated. You would potentially face criminal charges. Your husband has been setting you up to take the fall for his crimes for 2 years. The room spun. Claire gripped the bed rails. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. Michael was a lot of things. A cheater, a liar, someone who'd served divorce papers in a hospital room, but a criminal who would frame his own wife. But even as she thought it, she knew it was true. She could see it in the cold calculation in his eyes yesterday, in the way he'd timed everything so carefully, in the calm, measured way he'd explained that he'd already moved out, already hired lawyers, already decided their marriage was over before she even knew there was a problem. How much money? $4.7 million over 3 years. Thomas pulled out a document, placed it on her bedside table. Morrison Tech is a successful company. Your husband is the CFO. He has access to everything. He created a fake consulting company called Cascade Solutions, LLC, registered in Delaware. He approved invoices for services that were never rendered. The money went from Morrison Tech to Cascade, from Cascade to a Nevada shell company called Desert Consulting, from Desert Consulting to a Wyoming trust called Teton Holdings, and from the trust into personal accounts at Wells Fargo and Chase. The details were overwhelming. Claire stared at the document, at the neat columns of numbers and dates and transactions. She didn't understand most of it. She'd never been good with finances. That was Michael's domain. He handled their money, their investments, their taxes. She'd trusted him completely. That trust had been a weapon he'd turned against her. Your father bought the company to protect you. He now controls the investigation into the embezzlement. He can ensure the evidence points where it should point at your husband, not at you. Claire looked up at Thomas. Why are you telling me this? What does my father want? He wants to help you, but only if you want his help. He was very clear on that point. Thomas pulled out a business card, set it beside the document. He won't force anything. He won't demand reconciliation. He just wants to give you the tools to survive this. The choice is entirely yours. The choice? Claire laughed, bitter and sharp. What choice do I have? Sign Michael's papers and walk away with nothing, or accept help from the father who let my mother die? Some choice. There's a third option. Thomas's voice was gentle now, almost kind. Fight, with or without your father's help. You're not powerless, Mrs. Morrison. You're hurt, you're vulnerable, but you're not powerless. Not unless you choose to be. He stood up. He pulled a small flash drive from his briefcase pocket, placed it next to the business card. This contains everything: bank records, emails, wire transfer confirmations, proof of every dollar your husband has stolen, every account he's hidden, every lie he's told his board of directors. Review it. Think about it. Call me when you decide what you want to do. Thomas walked to the door, then paused. He turned back, something shifting in his professional demeanor. For what it's worth, I've been your father's attorney for 28 years. I was there when your mother got sick. I was there when she made him promise not to use his money for her treatment. I watched him honor a promise that tore him apart, and I watched him tear himself apart again when you cut him out of your life. He's not perfect. He's made terrible mistakes. But he loves you. He always has. Then he was gone. The door clicked shut. Claire stared at the flash drive, at the business card, at the document full of numbers that represented her husband's betrayal. $4.7 million. Her name on accounts she'd never opened. A conspiracy to destroy her that had been building for years while she smiled and made dinner and pretended everything was fine. She picked up her phone, scrolled through 3 years of photos looking for truth she'd refused to see before. There. A company Christmas party. Michael in the background turned slightly away from the camera. A blonde woman at his elbow. Sophie Barrett. There. A weekend trip to Napa Valley last fall. Michael checking his phone while Claire posed with a wine glass. His expression distant, his mind somewhere else. Someone else. there. Their anniversary dinner 3 months ago. Michael's smile that didn't reach his eyes. Claire beaming at the camera, oblivious, still believing in something that had died years before. She scrolled and scrolled. The evidence was everywhere, in plain sight. She had just refused to see it, refused to acknowledge that the man she'd married, the man she'd built a life with, had become a stranger who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle to remove. That night alone in her hospital room, Claire made a decision. She wasn't going to sign Michael's papers. She wasn't going to accept his scraps and walk away quietly like a good, grateful wife who understood she'd become inconvenient. She wasn't going to let him win. For the first time in 3 days, she felt something other than pain and shock and despair. She felt angry, and anger, she was learning, was so much better than helplessness. Claire discharged herself from the hospital 3 days early, against medical advice, against Nina's loud objections, against every instinct telling her to stay in bed and heal. But she couldn't heal lying in that room, not staring at those ceiling tiles, not waiting for Michael's lawyers to call with threats and deadlines. She needed to move. She needed to act. She needed to take control of something, even if it was just her own body. Nina helped her into a wheelchair, then into Nina's old Honda Civic. Every movement sent pain radiating through Claire's broken ribs. She gritted her teeth and endured it. Pain was temporary. Losing everything because she'd been too weak to fight, that was permanent. "Where are we going?" Nina asked as she started the car. Claire gave her an address, a coffee shop downtown. Nina's eyebrows shot up. "That's where Sophie Barrett goes every morning, her regular spot." "I know." "Claire, are you sure this is a good idea? Confronting the other woman?" "I'm not confronting her. I'm recruiting her." The coffee shop was small and upscale, the kind of place that served $8 lattes and organic pastries to people who worked in glass towers nearby. Claire sat at a corner table, her walker beside her, trying to look less broken than she felt. Nina waited in the car, ready to intervene if things went wrong. Sophie Barrett walked in at exactly 8:15, blonde, beautiful, younger than Claire by at least 6 years. She wore a tailored navy dress and carried herself with the confidence of a woman who had everything figured out. Until she saw Claire. Then her face went pale. Claire waved her over. For a moment she thought Sophie would run, but something shifted in her expression, a decision made in the space of a heartbeat. She walked to Claire's table and sat down. "I was wondering when you'd find me." Sophie's voice was quiet, controlled, but Claire could hear the fear underneath. "You were expecting this." "I was expecting something. The wife showing up at my coffee shop seemed inevitable." Sophie glanced at Eleanor's walker, at the careful way she was sitting. "I heard about your accident, and about the divorce papers. Everyone at the company heard." "Does everyone at the company also know about your affair with my husband?" Sophie flinched. "Some people suspect. Michael wasn't exactly subtle." Claire studied the woman across from her. She'd expected to find smugness, triumph, the satisfied smile of a mistress who'd won. Instead, she saw exhaustion, fear, and something that looked almost like relief. "You're not what I expected." Claire kept her voice level, curious rather than accusatory. "Neither are you." Sophie wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she needed something to hold on to. "I didn't know he was married. Not at first. He told me he was divorced." "When did you learn the truth?" 8 months in. March 2022. I saw his wedding ring in his car's glove compartment. When I confronted him, he said you two were separated, just waiting for paperwork. I believed him." Sophie's voice cracked slightly. "I wanted to believe him." Claire thought about the timeline. March 2022, a year after her hysterectomy. 6 months after Michael had started pulling away completely. He'd been building his exit strategy, creating his narrative, laying groundwork. You tried to end it. It wasn't a question. Claire could see it in the way Sophie held herself in the shadows under her eyes. 3 times. Sophie looked around the coffee shop, making sure no one was listening, then leaned in close. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Every time he threatened me, my job, my career, my reputation. He said he had HR files documenting performance issues that didn't exist. He said he'd make sure I never worked in finance again if I ever told anyone about us. The fear in Sophie's voice was real. This wasn't a woman who'd seduced her boss for advancement. This was a woman who'd been manipulated, threatened, trapped. "That's not the worst part, is it?" Claire asked quietly. Sophie shook her head. When she spoke again, her voice trembled. "He's been using my name on accounts I never opened, wire transfers through my bank that I never authorized. If anyone investigates the embezzlement, everyone's whispering about my fingerprints are all over it. I could go to prison for crimes I didn't commit." There it was, the same pattern. Michael using people, setting them up, creating scapegoats. Claire wasn't the only one he'd framed. Sophie was another insurance policy, another person to throw under the bus if his scheme fell apart. "Do you have proof?" Claire asked. Sophie reached into her purse. She pulled out a flash drive identical to the one Thomas had given Claire. "I've been collecting evidence for 6 months. Bank statements, emails, recordings of him threatening me. I've been carrying this every day, waiting for the right person to give it to, waiting for someone who could actually do something with it." She slid the flash drive across the table. Claire picked it up, feeling the weight of it. Such a small thing, such enormous implications. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because I need your help, and you need mine." Sophie's eyes met Claire's directly for the first time. "I slept with your husband. I know I can't take that back. But he used me the same way he used you. We're both his victims. The difference is, you might have the power to stop him. I don't." Claire thought about the resources Thomas had mentioned. Her father's ownership of Morrison Tech. Access to every file, every document, every transaction. The ability to control the investigation to ensure evidence pointed where it should. What if I told you there was a way to expose Michael without either of us taking the fall? Hope flickered in Sophie's eyes, tentative and fragile. "I'd say that sounds too good to be true." "Maybe it is, but I'm offering it anyway." Claire leaned forward despite the pain it caused. "My father owns Morrison Tech. Michael doesn't know. The board doesn't know. But my father has access to everything. Every document, every email, every transaction. He can ensure the investigation clears your name. Every account you were forced to sign, every transfer that used your information, all of it can be traced back to Michael's manipulation. You walk away clean." Sophie stared at her for a long moment. "Why would you help me? I slept with your husband." "Because he used you, and because I'm not going to let him destroy either of us." Claire pocketed the flash drive. "But I need to know something. Did you ever love him? Was any of it real for you?" Sophie was quiet. She looked down at her coffee, at the foam art dissolving into nothing. "I thought I did, at the beginning. But you can't love someone who doesn't exist. Michael only showed me a character, a role he was playing. The real Michael is whoever serves his interests in the moment. I was useful to him, that's all. And when I stopped being useful, he would have thrown me away too. Just like he's trying to throw you away now." Sophie stood up. Before she walked away, she said one more thing. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it. For being part of this without knowing what I was really part of. For not coming to you sooner. You're coming to me now. That's what matters." Claire sat alone at the table after Sophie left 2 flash drives in her pocket, the weight of evidence and possibility pressing against her hip. Nina appeared beside her, having watched the whole exchange from the car. "How'd it go?" "I just made an alliance with my husband's mistress. I think that's progress." Nina helped her back to the car. On the drive to Henry Sullivan's estate, Claire stared out the window at Chicago passing by. The city looked different now, sharper, clearer, like she'd been seeing everything through fog and someone had finally turned on the sun. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michael's lawyer. "Reminder, signed documents due Friday by 5 p.m. Please confirm receipt." Claire deleted it. She had 2 days until Michael's deadline. 2 days to decide if she was going to fight or surrender. 2 days to choose between the life she'd been living and the person she was becoming. The choice, as Thomas had said, was entirely hers. And for the first time in 3 days, Maybe for the first time in 3 years, Claire knew exactly what she wanted to do. Sullivan Estate sat on 50 acres of rolling hills outside Chicago, a sprawling mansion of stone and glass that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread about American wealth. Claire had never seen it before. In 15 years of estrangement, she'd never even known where her father lived. The gates opened automatically as Nina's Honda approached recognition technology embedded in security systems Claire couldn't begin to understand. The driveway curved through gardens that probably required a full-time staff. Apple trees heavy with fruit lined one side. A small lake reflected clouds on the other. Everything was maintained with precision wealth visible in every manicured hedge and perfectly raked gravel path. Henry Sullivan met her at the door. He looked worse than she'd expected. The cancer was progressing faster than his year prognosis suggested. His Brooks Brothers suit hung loose on a frame that had lost too much weight too quickly. His face was gaunt skin pulled tight over bones that seemed sharper than genetics intended. But his eyes were her eyes. The same hazel green she saw in mirrors now clouded with pain and something that might have been hope. "Thank you for coming." His voice was rougher than she remembered, worn down by chemotherapy and regret. "Thank you for not lying to me." Claire leaned heavily on her walker every step from the car, an exercise in stubborn will over screaming nerves. He led her through the house to a study lined with books that smelled like old leather and expensive tobacco. A fire crackled in the fireplace even though it was late spring warmth for bones that couldn't seem to stay warm anymore. Claire settled into a leather armchair that probably cost more than her car. Nina stayed in the doorway, protective and watchful. "Tell me everything." Claire's voice was steady, harder than it used to be. Hospital beds and divorce papers had burned away whatever softness she'd been carrying. Henry sat across from her, movements careful, like his body might break if he moved too fast. "I made my fortune in real estate and technology investments in the 90s and early 2000s. I was ruthless. I destroyed competitors. I betrayed partners. I did things I'm not proud of, things that hurt people who trusted me. Your mother knew all of it. She stayed with me anyway on one condition: I would never use that money. She called it blood money for our personal benefit. When she got sick in 2007, she refused treatment that required my wealth. She said she'd rather die than benefit from money made by hurting people." Claire remembered her mother's last months. The cheap hospice. The generic pain medication that barely touched her suffering. The way Karen Sullivan had grown smaller and smaller in that hospital bed, while Claire begged her to fight, to try experimental treatments, to not give up. Her mother had smiled and said some things cost more than money could measure. Claire had thought she meant her own life wasn't worth the expense. Now she understood differently. Karen hadn't been measuring her life's value. She'd been measuring the cost of compromising principles she'd held for decades. Why buy Michael's company? Why now? Henry pulled a folder from the side table, movements deliberate and slow. 3 years ago, I hired investigators to check on you from a distance, not to interfere, just to know you were safe, that you were happy. They discovered you were neither. 2 years ago, they found evidence Michael was stealing from Morrison Tech. 6 months ago, the company needed capital. Stock price dropping, board panicking. I made an offer through Sullivan Holdings. The board voted yes unanimously. Michael never knew the real buyer. He opened the folder. Inside were photographs Claire recognized from Nina's phone, but dozens more. Michael and Sophie at restaurants. Michael and Sophie entering hotels. Michael and Sophie in parking garages, his hand on her waist, her head on his shoulder. A documentary of betrayal spanning 3 years, cataloged and dated with investigator precision. Beneath the photographs were financial documents, bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, corporate filings for Cascade Solutions, LLC, Desert Consulting Inc., Teton Holdings Trust. A paper trail of theft winding through Delaware and Nevada and Wyoming like a snake eating its own tail. Thomas appeared in the doorway, briefcase in hand. He'd been waiting somewhere in this enormous house, ready to provide legal context to emotional revelations. Sullivan Holdings owns 51% controlling interest in Morrison Tech. Your father has access to all internal documents. We found 127 fraudulent invoices, 43 wire transfers, 8 separate accounts. 3 of those accounts use Claire's forged signature. Total embezzlement, $4.7 million over 3 years. The numbers were staggering. Claire stared at photocopies of her own signature on documents she'd never seen, accounts she'd never opened, transactions that would send her to prison if anyone believed she'd authorized them. But there's a problem. Thomas set his briefcase down, pulled out more papers. Michael is smarter than we initially assessed. He's been creating a parallel paper trail that implicates you. If we move too fast, he'll burn everything and you'll take the fall. We need to be strategic, methodical. We need to gather every piece of evidence before we strike. Claire looked at her father. You bought his company to protect me. I bought it to give you options. Whether you use them is your choice. Henry's hands trembled slightly as he closed the folder. I won't force reconciliation. I won't demand forgiveness I haven't earned. But I can't sit by and watch him destroy you when I have the power to stop it. Your mother asked me to protect you if you ever needed it. This is me honoring that promise. The mention of her mother cracked something in Claire's chest. She'd spent 15 years angry at her father for not saving Karen. Now she was learning Karen had forbidden him to try, that her mother's death had been a choice, not abandonment, that Henry had honored his wife's wishes even as it killed him to watch her die. I need to know why Mom made you promise, why she really refused treatment. Henry was quiet for a long moment. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside wind moved through apple trees, rustling leaves against windows. Your mother believed in accountability. She believed that money made by harming others was tainted. She'd watched me build an empire on the backs of people I'd crushed, and she'd made peace with staying married to me despite it. But she drew the line at personally benefiting from that harm. She said if she used my money to extend her life, she'd be complicit in everything I'd done to earn it. She chose integrity over survival. It was the most painful gift she ever gave me, the gift of respecting her principles even when they killed her. Claire thought about her mother. Karen Sullivan had been a teacher, had worked in Chicago public schools for 30 years, had believed in right and wrong with a clarity that left no room for compromise. She'd taught Claire that character was what you did when no one was watching, that principles only mattered if you held them when they cost you something. Karen had held her principles all the way to the grave. She left letters for me. Henry's voice broke. Letters she wrote during her last months. She asked me to give them to you when you were ready. I've been holding them for 15 years, waiting to know if this moment would ever come. He pulled a stack of envelopes from the folder, old paper yellowed with age, tied together with a faded ribbon that had once been pink. Claire took them with shaking hands. Her mother's handwriting on the first envelope, "For Claire, when she's ready to understand." Claire untied the ribbon. The first letter was dated 3 months before Karen died. My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. I'm so sorry, my darling girl. Sorry for leaving you. Sorry for the secrets. Sorry for all the things I couldn't explain while I was alive. Your father loves you more than you'll ever know, more than he knows how to say. He's made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But so have I. We all have. Don't spend your life angry, Eleanor. Don't let bitterness poison the years you have left. Your father needs you. And whether you know it or not, you need him too. I love you. I've always loved you. I will always love you. Be brave, my darling. Be kind. And be happy. Forever yours, Mom. Claire couldn't see through her tears. The words blurred on the page, her mother's voice speaking from beyond the grave, asking for the forgiveness Claire had withheld for 15 years. She read through the letters one by one, each dated to a milestone Karen would never see. Her college graduation, her wedding day, her first promotion. Her mother's voice offering wisdom and love and the gentle insistence that Henry deserved another chance. When she finished, hours had passed. The fire had burned down to embers. Nina had brought tea at some point, left it on the side table, disappeared back to give them privacy. Henry sat silently across from her patient and still waiting. I don't know if I can forgive you. Claire's voice was raw from crying. Not completely. Not yet. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for time. Whatever time I have left. Henry's eyes were wet. I don't want to die as strangers." Claire looked at her dying father, at the man she'd hated for 15 years, at the man who'd been watching over her from the shadows because her mother had asked him to. She thought about Michael's cold eyes and calculated cruelty. She thought about Sophie's fear and the flash drives full of evidence. She thought about wire transfers and offshore accounts and signatures forged to send her to prison. "I don't want that either." She didn't hug him. They weren't there yet. But she reached out and took his hand. His grip was weak, fragile, the grip of a man who knew his days were numbered. "What do we do about Michael?" "We destroy him." Henry's voice gained strength, purpose cutting through pain. "Carefully, methodically. We gather every piece of evidence. We ensure your name is cleared. And then we make him answer for what he's done." Claire squeezed his hand. "Then let's get started." The next morning Claire met Sophie Barrett for coffee again. Same shop, same corner table, but this time with purpose instead of desperation. Sophie arrived early, nervous energy visible in the way she gripped her purse, in the way her eyes scanned the room looking for threats. "I talked to my father's attorney. He can protect you." Claire kept her voice low. The morning crowd was thinner but still present, executives grabbing lattes before heading to Glass Towers. "Every document you signed under duress, every account Michael opened using your information, all of it can be traced back to his manipulation. You'll be classified as a victim, not an accomplice." Sophie's shoulders dropped, tension releasing. "You're serious. This is real." "This is real. But I need everything you have. Every recording, every email, every piece of evidence you've been collecting. We're building a case and your testimony is crucial." Sophie pulled out her flash drive again, but this time she also pulled out a notebook, pages filled with dates and times and detailed notes. "I documented everything after the first time he threatened me. Every conversation, every demand. I recorded our meetings when I could. Texas is a one-party consent state, so most of them are legal. A few aren't admissible in court, but they show pattern of behavior." Claire took the notebook, flipped through pages of meticulous record-keeping. Sophie had been preparing for this moment for months, building her own insurance policy, waiting for someone who could actually use it. "There's something else you should know." Sophie's voice dropped even lower. "Michael's been talking to his sister Charlotte. She works in corporate law in Boston. He's been asking her about fraud defense strategies, about how to shift blame onto co-conspirators. He's preparing for the possibility that he gets caught, and he's planning to throw both of us under the bus when it happens." The calculation made Claire's blood run cold. Michael wasn't just stealing and cheating. He was building contingencies, creating narratives, ensuring that even if his scheme collapsed, he'd have scapegoats ready. "When did you hear this?" "Last week. He called her from his car. I was still there. He didn't think I was listening, but I recorded it." Sophie pulled out her phone, queued up an audio file. Michael's voice tinny through phone speakers, but unmistakably his discussing hypothetical fraud scenarios with his sister, asking how prosecutors decide who to charge, whether wives and girlfriends could be considered knowing participants. Claire listened to her husband casually planning her destruction like he was discussing quarterly projections. No emotion, no hesitation, just cold assessment of how to minimize his own liability by maximizing hers. He's been planning this for years. The realization settled over her like ice water. Michael hadn't just decided to leave her after the accident. He'd been building toward this moment since he started stealing, maybe longer. The affair with Sophie, the forged signatures, the offshore accounts. All of it was construction of an exit strategy that left Claire holding the bag. "We need to move faster than I thought." Claire stood up, pain shooting through her pelvis. She ignored it. Pain was temporary. Prison was permanent. "My father is calling an emergency board meeting. We're going to present everything directly to Morrison Tech's board of directors. No SEC, no FBI, no government agencies that might take months to investigate. We force the board to act immediately." "When?" "5 days from now. Can you testify in front of them?" Sophie's face went pale. "Michael will destroy me." "Michael is going to be destroyed. The question is whether you want to be there to watch it happen, or whether you want to spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, waiting for him to decide you're a liability he needs to eliminate." Claire leaned forward. You can run and hope he forgets you, or you can fight and guarantee your freedom, your choice. But if you run, know this, he'll come for you eventually. Men like Michael always tie up loose ends. Sophie was quiet for a long moment. People moved around them, ordering coffee, checking phones, living lives that didn't include embezzlement and betrayal, and the choice between safety and justice. Finally, she looked up. What do you need me to do? Tell the truth. In front of the board. That's all. 3 days before the board meeting, Sophie called Claire at 2 in the morning. Her voice was shaking, words tumbling over each other in panic. He knows. Michael knows I talked to you. He showed up at my apartment tonight. He had photos of us at the coffee shop. He said if I testify against him, he'll make sure I'm charged with conspiracy. He has lawyers ready. I can't do this, Claire. I can't go to prison. I'm withdrawing my cooperation. Claire's heart sank. Without Sophie's testimony, they had financial records and forged signatures, but no insider witness to Michael's threats and manipulation. The board might believe the documents. They might not. Corporate boards were notoriously protective of their executives, reluctant to believe the worst until evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Sophie, listen to me. The line went dead. Claire called Thomas immediately. He answered on the second ring voice alert despite the hour. Lawyers who served billionaires learned to sleep lightly. We just lost our key witness. Michael threatened her. She's pulling out. Thomas was quiet for 3 seconds, calculating. We still have the financial records. We can proceed without her. But without her testimony, Michael will say we fabricated everything. He'll say I'm bitter about the divorce, that my father orchestrated this to punish him. The board won't know who to believe. Then we get her back. She's terrified. She thinks she's going to prison. Then we make her more terrified of what happens if she doesn't testify. Thomas's voice was cold, strategic. I'll draft an immunity agreement, full protection from prosecution. But Claire, you need to convince her. You're the only one she might trust right now. Claire looked at the clock. 2:15 in the morning. Sophie was probably awake, probably staring at her ceiling, probably imagining a future behind bars. Claire grabbed her keys. Nina tried to stop her. You can barely walk. You're in no condition to drive across Chicago in the middle of the night. Then drive me. But I'm going. Sophie is the difference between Michael in handcuffs and Michael walking free. I'm not losing this because she's scared. Sophie's apartment was in a high-rise downtown, the kind of building young professionals aspired to when they landed good jobs at companies like Morrison Tech. Nina pulled up to the entrance. Claire buzzed Sophie's unit. No answer. She buzzed again and again. Finally, the intercom crackled. Go away, Claire. I can't help you. I'm sorry. I'm not leaving until you let me up. I'll stand here all night if I have to. I have nowhere else to be. Michael already took my marriage. He's trying to take my freedom. I have nothing left to lose. Do you? Silence. Then the door buzzed open. Sophie's apartment was small but neat, decorated with the careful taste of someone who'd worked hard to get here and wasn't going to waste it. She answered the door in pajamas, eyes red from crying, hair pulled back in a messy knot. You shouldn't have come. I'm not here to convince you to testify. I'm here to tell you what happens if you don't. Claire walked past her into the living room, lowered herself onto the couch with a wince. Michael has already built a case against you. You told me yourself accounts in your name, wire transfers through your bank signatures you were manipulated into providing. If he goes down, he's taking you with him. That's his plan. That's always been his plan. He said if I testify, he'll make it worse. He's lying. He can't make it worse because it's already as bad as it gets. Your name is all over his fraud. The only way you survive this is to get ahead of it, to tell your story before he tells his, to be the victim instead of the accomplice. Sophie sat down hard in a chair across from the couch. What if they don't believe me? Then we're both going to prison, and Michael gets to walk away clean. Claire pulled out her phone, showed Sophie the immunity agreement Thomas had emailed. But if you testify, this protects you. Full immunity from prosecution. My father's lawyers will represent you for free. Every document you signed gets traced back to Michael's coercion. You walk away clean. Why are you doing this? I slept with your husband. I'm the other woman. You should hate me. Claire thought about that. A week ago, she would have hated Sophie, would have seen her as the enemy, the home wrecker, the reason her marriage fell apart. But she'd learned things in hospital beds and coffee shops and her father's study. She'd learned that the world was more complicated than villains and victims, that people could be both at the same time, that Michael had hurt more people than just her. I did hate you. For about 10 minutes. Then I realized you're not my enemy. You're his victim, just like me. And the only way either of us wins is if we fight him together. Claire stood up, pain shooting through her pelvis like electricity. You have two choices, Sophie. Stand with me or stand alone. But standing alone means Michael controls the narrative. And men who control narratives don't leave loose ends. Sophie looked at the immunity agreement on Claire's phone. She looked at Claire, at the woman whose husband she'd slept with, who should have been her enemy, but was instead offering protection. She looked at her hands, at fingers that had signed documents she didn't understand, that had enabled crimes she didn't commit. What do I need to do? Tell the truth. That's all. Just tell the truth. 5 days before the board meeting, Claire invited Michael to dinner. His choice of restaurant, his choice of time. He thought he was in control. He had no idea how wrong he was. The Capitol Grill at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday. Michael arrived exactly on time. Brooks Brothers navy suit, Rolex, glinting under restaurant lights. He kissed her cheek like they were old friends catching up, like he hadn't served her divorce papers in a hospital bed, like 12 years of marriage meant casual affection instead of deep betrayal. He ordered wine without asking what she wanted. Expensive Napa Cabernet, the kind he'd always preferred. Claire had never particularly liked red wine. Too heavy, too bitter. But Michael had never asked her preference, had simply assumed his taste was universal. You look good. Much better than at the hospital. He smiled, charm deployed like a weapon he'd been sharpening for years. I'm healing. Claire sipped water instead of wine. She needed clarity tonight, needed every neuron firing. Slowly, but healing. I'm glad. I know the timing of everything was difficult. But I think we should handle this like adults. No drama, no lawyers drawing things out. A clean break. How generous of you. Claire watched him over the rim of her glass. She'd been married to this man for 12 years. Had memorized his expressions, had learned to read the micro movements that betrayed what he was really thinking. Right now, he was confident, pleased with himself, certain he was winning. I've had my lawyer draw up a revised settlement offer, more generous than the original. I think you'll find it fair. He pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. The house, your Lexus, enough to cover your medical expenses and give you a fresh start. It's more than reasonable. Claire opened the folder. The numbers were insultingly small. The house they'd bought together, split with Michael taking 70% equity because he'd contributed more to the down payment. Her car worth maybe $30,000. $50,000 for medical expenses that would exceed 6 figures by the time physical therapy ended. And nothing else. No retirement accounts, no stock options, no share of the business he'd built while married to her. More than reasonable. He actually believed that, or he believed she was stupid enough to accept it. I've been thinking about our marriage. Claire closed the folder, pushed it aside. All 12 years of it. Trying to understand when things changed. Was it gradual? Or was there a specific moment you decided I wasn't enough anymore? Michael's smile flickered just for a second. This wasn't the script he'd prepared. Claire, I don't think this is productive. I'm curious. When did you start planning your exit strategy? When did you start sleeping with Sophie Barrett? When did you decide to steal from your own company and frame me for it? His face went pale, actual color draining from his skin like someone had opened a valve. The confident executive vanished, replaced by something frightened and cornered. I don't know what you've heard, but I've heard everything, Michael. I've seen everything. Claire leaned forward, voice dropping to just above a whisper. Restaurant noise continued around them, other diners oblivious to the conversation happening in their midst. Photos of you and Sophie at restaurants, at hotels, in your Tesla. Bank statements from accounts I never knew existed. Emails between you and your Delaware shell company. Wire transfers from Morrison Tech to Cascade Solutions to Desert Consulting to Teton Holdings to your personal accounts at Wells Fargo and Chase. $4.7 million over 3 years. Shall I continue? Michael set down his wine glass. His hand was shaking. Eleanor, whatever you think you know. I also know you've been using my name, my social security number, forging my signature on documents I've never seen, setting me up to take the fall if anyone investigates. I know you had the same plan for Sophie, use her frame, her discard her. I know you've been consulting with your sister about fraud defense strategies. And I know you think you're going to walk away clean while I go to prison. His jaw clenched. The mask crumbled completely, revealing the calculation underneath. What do you want? There it was, the question she'd been waiting for. Michael reduced to negotiation, trying to buy his way out of consequences the same way he'd bought everything else in his life. I want a fair divorce settlement, an accurate accounting of our marital assets, half of everything including what you hid in Nevada and Wyoming. And I want you to leave Sophie alone. Drop the threats, clear her name, let her walk away. And if I refuse... Claire smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who'd learned that power came from information, from preparation, from being willing to burn everything down if necessary. Then my father turns over his evidence to the FBI. Securities fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, embezzlement. You'll spend the next 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Your choice. She stood up. Every movement sent pain through her healing bones, but she didn't let it show. She picked up her purse, left a $20 bill on the table for the wine she hadn't drunk. Oh, and Michael, your deadline is Friday. I think that's more than fair. She walked out of the restaurant. Behind her, she heard Michael calling her name, demanding she come back, threatening, pleading. She didn't look back. Nina was waiting in the parking lot, engine running. How did it go? I made him sweat. Claire climbed into the car, adrenaline making her hands shake. God, Nina, I can't believe I just did that. I threatened my husband with federal prison. Ex-husband. Soon-to-be ex-husband anyway. Nina pulled out of the parking lot. Where to now? My father's estate. We have work to do. Michael didn't go quietly. 3 days after the restaurant confrontation, Claire received a certified letter from his lawyers. Not a settlement offer, a threat. Michael was claiming she had been involved in the embezzlement, that the offshore accounts were her idea, that she had manipulated him into the scheme and was now trying to frame him to cover her own guilt. He was suing for sole ownership of the house, full custody of their assets, and reimbursement for emotional distress her false accusations had caused. Claire read the letter 3 times, each time her blood running colder. He was doubling down, actually trying to make her the villain. Was this always his plan? She showed the letter to Thomas in Henry's study, fire crackling, spring rain pattering against windows. If he couldn't escape investigation, drag me down with him. Thomas nodded grimly. That was always his plan, but he doesn't know what we know. He thinks you're bluffing. He thinks your father's involvement is a lie you invented to scare him. He's calling what he believes is a bluff. So what do? We call his bluff. Thomas picked up his phone, dialed a number from memory. I'm moving the board meeting up, tomorrow afternoon. We don't give him time to prepare, time to build more defenses. We hit him while he thinks he's winning. The next week was a blur of preparation. Thomas assembled a team of lawyers, forensic accountants, and investigators. They built a case that was airtight, irrefutable, documented down to the last wire transfer and forged signature. But Michael had resources too. Connections, friends in high places. He started a whisper campaign against Claire, telling colleagues she was mentally unstable, that the accident had affected her brain, that she was making wild accusations because she couldn't accept the divorce. Some people believed him. Claire started getting looks at the grocery store. Former friends stopped returning her calls. Someone left a note on her car, "Gold digger." The cruelest part was that Michael had convinced his own sister. Charlotte Morrison called one night screaming accusations, saying Claire was trying to destroy their family. "How can you do this to him? He gave you everything. He loved you, and this is how you repay him." Claire tried to explain. Charlotte hung up mid-sentence. She found Nina that night at 2 a.m. sitting in the bathtub, fully clothed, water running cold around her. Nina pulled her out, wrapped her in towels, made her drink hot tea that burned her throat. "Everyone believes him. Everyone thinks I'm the crazy one, the gold digger, the manipulator." Nina sat beside her, held her hand. "Not everyone. Not the people who matter. And here's the thing about abusers, they're charming. That's how they get away with it for so long. They convince everyone around them that they're the good guy, that their victim is the problem. It's not a reflection of you, Claire. It's a reflection of how good he is at lying. What if I can't win? Then you go down fighting, but you don't let him win by giving up." Nina squeezed her hand harder. "You're not alone. You have me. You have your father. You have the truth. And the truth matters, Claire, even when it feels like it doesn't." The next morning, Claire woke with new resolve. She was done playing defense, done waiting for Michael to make the next move. The board meeting was in 3 days. She had evidence, she had Sophie, she had her father's ownership stake. It was time to stop running and start fighting. She called Henry. "I'm ready. Let's destroy him." The night before the board meeting, Claire drove to her childhood home. The house had been sold years ago, was owned by someone else now, but she parked across the street and stared at windows where light glowed warm and yellow. She remembered her mother in the kitchen teaching her to make apple pie from scratch. Her father in the living room teaching her to play chess, explaining that sometimes you had to sacrifice pieces to win the game. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "You're making a mistake. You don't know what you're starting. Back down now, and I'll let you walk away with something. Push me, and you'll leave with nothing." Claire didn't respond. She deleted the text. Then she called Nina. "Tomorrow when I walk into that boardroom, I need you to be there. Not as my nurse, as my best friend, as my witness, as the person who's seen me at my worst and still believes I can do this. I'll be there, front row. And if Michael so much as looks at you wrong, I'll tackle him myself." Claire laughed, the sound surprising her. For the first time in weeks, she felt something other than fear and pain and determination. She felt almost light. She sat in her car across from her childhood home, thinking about her mother, about her father, about 12 years with Michael, all of it leading to this moment. Tomorrow she would walk into Morrison Tech headquarters. Tomorrow she would face Michael in front of his board. Tomorrow she would either win her freedom or lose everything. But tonight she opened her phone's notes app and wrote, "Tomorrow I stop being a victim. Tomorrow I become the person Mom always believed I could be. Tomorrow Michael Morrison learns that some doors once closed can never be opened again." She drove back to her father's estate. Henry was still awake despite the late hour, sitting in his study with a book he wasn't really reading. He looked up when she entered, nervous, terrified. Claire sat across from him. "What if it doesn't work? What if they don't believe me?" "Then we tried, and trying matters even when we fail." Henry closed his book. "Your mother used to say that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. You're doing the right thing, Claire. Whatever happens tomorrow, you're doing the right thing." Claire stayed up most of the night reviewing documents, memorizing numbers, preparing for every question the board might ask. Thomas went over her testimony 3 times, coaching her on tone and pacing and how to project confidence when she felt anything but. At dawn, Nina arrived with coffee and a dress bag. "I brought you something to wear, something that says, 'I'm here to win, not beg.'" Inside the bag was a white Ralph Lauren power suit, perfectly tailored, elegant, and fierce. Nina had somehow found Claire's exact size, had anticipated this moment before Claire had known it was coming. "When did you buy this?" "Last week. I had a feeling you'd need armor." Nina smiled. "Besides, white is for victory. Red is for battle. You're about to do both." Claire put on the suit. She looked at herself in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. Not the wife who'd been served divorce papers in a hospital bed, not the victim who'd cried in bathtubs. Someone new, someone harder, someone who'd learned that silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. She applied minimal makeup. Stuart Weitzman black heels that hurt her healing pelvis but made her stand taller. Diamond studs her mother had given her on her wedding day back when she'd still believed in forever. At 9:30 they left for Morrison Tech headquarters. Henry came with them, though he could barely walk. Thomas drove, navigating Chicago traffic with practiced ease. Nobody spoke. There was nothing left to say. Everything that mattered would happen in the next 2 hours. Morrison Tech occupied floors 12 through 16 of a glass tower downtown. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the executive conference room on 14. Claire arrived at 9:50 exactly on time. Not early enough to seem desperate. Not late enough to seem disrespectful. The conference room was all glass and steel built to intimidate. A mahogany table that could seat 20. Leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's cars. Floor-to-ceiling windows with views of Chicago stretching to the lake. Board members arrived. 8 directors, 5 men, 3 women representing various interests and investment firms. The CFO, General Counsel. Michael arrived last, Brooks Brothers charcoal suit, confidence radiating off him like cologne. He saw Claire and his step faltered. Just for a second. Then the mask slid back into place. "Eleanor, what are you doing here?" Thomas stood. "Mrs. Morrison is here at the request of the majority shareholder. As are you, Mr. Morrison. Please sit." Michael's eyes narrowed. He looked around the room, counting allies, assessing threats. He sat at the far end of the table, as far from Claire as geometry allowed. At exactly 10 o'clock, Thomas stood. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a remote control. "The agenda has changed. Today we're reviewing financial irregularities spanning 3 years, specifically a pattern of embezzlement and fraud that has cost this company $4.7 million and exposed it to significant legal liability." The room went silent. Michael's face remained carefully neutral, but Claire saw his knuckles go white where he gripped the table edge. Thomas clicked the remote. A screen descended from the ceiling. The first slide appeared: Cascade Solutions, LLC, registration documents from Delaware. In June 2021, CFO Michael Morrison created a consulting company called Cascade Solutions. This company has no employees, no office, no phone number. It exists solely on paper. Over the next 3 years, Morrison Tech paid Cascade $4.7 million for services that were never rendered. Another slide. 127 invoices, dates, and amounts highlighted in red. These invoices were approved by Mr. Morrison personally. The payments were authorized through his accounts. The money went from Morrison Tech to Cascade, from Cascade to a Nevada shell company called Desert Consulting, from Desert to a Wyoming trust called Teton Holdings, and from Teton into Mr. Morrison's personal accounts at Wells Fargo and Chase Private Client. Michael stood. "This is absurd. These documents are fabricated. This is a hostile takeover disguised as a criminal investigation. I demand—" Claire's voice cut through his protests. "Sit down, Michael." Her tone wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was cold and final, the voice of someone who'd stopped caring about his opinion 6 restaurant dinners ago. Michael stared at her. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely uncertain. "You're going to sit down. You're going to be quiet. And you're going to listen. Because for 12 years I sat and listened to your lies. Today, you listen to the truth." He sat. Claire stood. She walked to the front of the room, stood beside Thomas, looked at the board members who would decide her future. "My name is Claire Morrison. I'm Michael's wife. 3 weeks ago he served me divorce papers while I was in a hospital bed recovering from a car accident. He didn't visit me for 3 days. He didn't hold my hand. He brought paperwork and a deadline. I thought I knew my husband. I thought I knew the man I married. I was wrong." She nodded to Thomas. He advanced the slides. Wire transfers, bank statements, account registrations using Claire's forged signature. For 3 years he's been stealing from this company. For 3 years he's been manipulating employees. For 3 years he's been building a false narrative to protect himself while setting up scapegoats to take his fall. Another nod. Sophie Barrett's photo appeared on screen. Then Sophie herself walked into the room escorted by one of Thomas's associates. She looked terrified but determined, wearing a navy suit that made her look older, more professional. "This is Sophie Barrett, junior executive in your finance division. For 2 years she's been unknowingly involved in Mr. Morrison's fraud. He manipulated her into signing documents she didn't understand. He threatened her career when she tried to end their relationship. He opened accounts in her name to create another layer of liability insurance." Sophie's voice shook, but held. "Michael Morrison told me he was divorced. When I discovered he was married, I tried to end things. He threatened my job, my reputation, my future. He said he had files documenting performance issues that didn't exist. He said he'd make sure I never worked in finance again. I have recordings of those threats." Thomas played audio. Michael's voice, cold and menacing, explaining exactly how he would destroy Sophie's career if she didn't cooperate. The board members shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't abstract financial crime anymore. This was a man threatening a young woman, using his power to coerce silence. More slides. Emails showing Michael's instructions to transfer money. IP addresses traced to his laptop. Digital signatures matched to his devices. The evidence was overwhelming, meticulous, irrefutable. Margaret Reynolds, a board member in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes, spoke first. "Michael, is this true?" Michael's mask had crumbled completely. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the climate control. "She's lying. They're all lying. This is a conspiracy orchestrated by Claire because she's bitter about the divorce. My wife is mentally unstable. The accident affected her judgment. You can't trust anything she says." "Then explain the wire transfers." Claire's voice was steady. "Explain the invoices. Explain why Cascade Solutions has no employees, no office, no services rendered. Explain the recordings of you threatening Sophie. Explain the emails sent from your computer, the signatures matched to your devices." "I can explain all of that if you give me time to prepare a proper response." "You've had 3 years to prepare." Thomas clicked to the final slide. "We're done waiting." Margaret Reynolds looked at the other board members. Silent communication passed between them, the kind that came from years of working together. She turned back to Michael. "I've heard enough. I move to vote on immediate suspension of Michael Morrison pending full investigation." Another board member, a man named David Chen, seconded. "I second the motion." The vote was unanimous, 8-0. Michael slammed the table. "You can't do this. I built this company. I made you people millions. You owe me. We owe you nothing." Margaret's voice was ice. "You stole from this company. You lied to this board. You manipulated employees and forged documents. You're lucky we're only suspending you and not calling the police right now." Thomas stepped forward. "Actually, about that. We've already contacted the FBI. Agent Sarah Martinez from the Financial Crimes Division is waiting downstairs. She's very interested in reviewing these documents." The color drained from Michael's face completely. This was real. This was happening. His carefully constructed world was collapsing in real time in front of witnesses he'd thought were allies. Security guards appeared at the door. They escorted Michael from the room, him protesting the entire way, demanding lawyers, threatening lawsuits, his voice growing fainter as they led him to the elevators. As he passed Claire, he hissed one final threat. "You'll regret this." Claire looked him in the eyes. "The only thing I regret is the 12 years I wasted believing your lies." The doors closed behind him. The boardroom fell silent. Then Margaret approached Claire, hand extended. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm sorry we didn't see this sooner. If you need anything from this company, I need you to protect your employees. Make sure Sophie isn't punished for being a victim. Make sure this never happens again." Margaret nodded. "You have my word." The Morrison tech lobby had never felt so vast. Claire, Thomas, and Sophie rode the elevator down in silence, the kind of quiet that follows earthquakes when the ground stops shaking, but everyone's still waiting for aftershocks. Through the glass walls, Chicago stretched out in afternoon sun, oblivious to the fact that a man's empire had just crumbled on the 14th floor. The elevator doors opened. FBI agent Sarah Martinez stood near the security desk, mid-40s black suit that screamed federal authority eyes that had seen every variety of white-collar criminal and found none of them particularly impressive. Two junior agents flanked her, both carrying briefcases that probably contained warrants and recording equipment. Michael was already there, standing between Morrison Tech security guards who'd been told to keep him from leaving. He'd regained some composure, pulled the executive mask back on, but his hands trembled slightly as he straightened his tie. That tell gave him away. Michael Morrison was terrified. Michael Morrison. Agent Martinez's voice carried the flat efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times. You're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. She read him his Miranda rights while one of the junior agents produced handcuffs. The lobby had people in it, employees heading to late lunch, delivery workers, a maintenance crew, changing light fixtures. They all stopped to watch. Some pulled out phones, started recording. By tonight, this would be on social media. By tomorrow, the Chicago Tribune would have the story. Michael's eyes found Claire one last time. You destroyed me. Claire felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication. Not even the anger that had sustained her through hospital beds and coffee shops and her father's study. Just emptiness where 12 years of marriage used to live. No. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone else could see it. The FBI led him out through glass doors to a black SUV idling at the curb. People on the sidewalk stopped to stare. Someone took a photo. Michael ducked his head, trying to hide his face, but it was too late. The image of Morrison Tech's CFO in handcuffs would be everywhere within the hour. Sophie stood beside Claire, watching through the windows. Is it really over? For you? Yes. Your name is clear. You're free. Claire turned to face her. What will you do now? Leave Chicago. Start over somewhere nobody knows this story. Sophie's voice was quiet but certain. Maybe Seattle. I have a college friend there who works at a tech company. Says they're always hiring finance people. That's good. That's really good. Claire pulled out one of Thomas's business cards, wrote her personal number on the back. If you ever need anything, a reference, legal help, just someone who understands, call me. Sophie took the card, held it like it was something precious. Thank you. I'll never forget this. What you did for me. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth. That took more courage than anything I did. They hugged briefly, awkwardly, two women who'd been connected by betrayal, learning how to be connected by something better. Then Sophie walked out through the same doors Michael had just been escorted through, heading toward whatever future she could build from the wreckage. Thomas touched Claire's elbow. We should go. Your father is waiting for news. The drive back to Sullivan Estate felt longer than it was. Thomas made phone calls to other lawyers, coordinating next steps, discussing civil suits and asset seizures. Claire stared out the window at Chicago, passing by at streets she'd driven 1,000 times when her life was different, when she'd been someone else. Her phone buzzed. Nina, tell me everything. Did you destroy him? Please tell me you destroyed him. Claire typed back, FB. I arrested him in the lobby. Handcuffs. Miranda rights, the whole thing. Nina's response was immediate. I wish I'd been there to see his face. You and me both. Henry was sitting in his study when they arrived, same leather chair, same crackling fire, even though spring had turned warm. He looked worse than he had a week ago. The cancer was progressing despite chemotherapy eating him from the inside. But his eyes were alert, sharp, waiting. Tell me everything. His voice was rough, weakened by pain and medication. Claire told him. The boardroom, the slides, Sophie's testimony, the unanimous vote, Michael's arrest. Henry listened without interrupting, and when she finished, something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. Relief, maybe. or the closest thing to peace a dying man could feel. Your mother would be proud of you. I'm proud of you. He reached for her hand grip, weak but present. You didn't need saving. You just needed the tools to save yourself. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. Maybe not this quickly, maybe not this cleanly, but you would have found a way. That's who you are, Claire. That's who you've always been. Henry coughed, the sound wet and painful. There's something I need to tell you. About my will, about what happens after I'm gone. Dad, we don't need to talk about this now. Yes, we do. I don't have the luxury of later. He pulled a folder from the side table, hands shaking with effort. Half my estate goes to charity. Cancer research, women's shelters, legal aid clinics. Organizations that help people who can't help themselves. The other half goes to you. The house, the investments, Sullivan Holdings, everything. Use it wisely. Use it to help people. Be better than I was. Claire's throat tightened. I don't need your money. I know. That's exactly why I'm giving it to you. Because you won't waste it on yourself. You'll do good things with it. You'll help people who need help the same way you needed help. He squeezed her hand harder. Promise me something. Promise you won't spend your life looking backward. Don't let regret poison the years you have left. Live forward. That's all I ask. I promise. They sat together as afternoon faded to evening, father and daughter. 15 years of silence finally broken. Outside, the sun set over 50 acres of garden and orchard. Inside, a dying man and his daughter talked about everything they'd missed, graduations and promotions and marriages and mistakes. Making up for lost time they'd never get back. 6 months passed. The trial played out exactly as Thomas had predicted. Michael's lawyers tried every defense: mistaken identity, fraudulent evidence, mental incompetence. None of it worked. The forensic accountants had built a case so airtight that even Michael's expensive defense team couldn't find cracks. Wire transfers didn't lie. Digital signatures didn't forget. Bank records told a story no lawyer could rewrite. Michael pled guilty to reduced charges. His attorneys negotiated a deal to avoid the spectacle of a full trial. 24 months in minimum security federal prison. A fine of $4.7 million plus penalties. Permanent ban from working in finance. 3 years supervised release after his sentence. The judge accepted the plea with visible distaste, making it clear she would have preferred a harsher sentence but respected the prosecution's judgment. Claire didn't attend the sentencing. She didn't need closure that came from watching him in handcuffs, didn't need to see him humiliated in front of a courtroom full of strangers. Nina went in her place, texted updates throughout the proceedings. When it was over, Claire was sitting beside Henry's bed at the estate, reading him Frost poetry because Karen had loved Frost, and Henry found comfort in things his wife had loved. How do you feel? Henry's voice was barely a whisper now. The cancer had stolen most of his strength, left him skeletal and gray. I don't know. I thought I'd feel satisfied, vindicated. I just feel tired. That's okay. You ended a war. You're allowed to be tired. He managed a small smile. Rest now. You've earned it. The divorce was finalized the same week Michael was sentenced. No drama, no courtroom battles. With Michael facing prison time, his lawyers advised him to settle quickly and favorably. Claire received the house, her Lexus, half of all legitimate marital assets totaling just over $800,000. The stolen funds were recovered and returned to Morrison Tech. Sophie's name was cleared completely in all official documentation, her personnel file amended to show she'd been a victim of executive misconduct rather than a participant. Charlotte Morrison called 2 months after the trial. Claire almost didn't answer. Michael's sister had been vicious during the investigation, had called Claire every name she could think of, had threatened lawsuits and sworn revenge. But something made Claire pick up on the fourth ring. Charlotte's voice was small, broken. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I said. I didn't know. I didn't know what he'd done. I believed him because he's my brother and I thought blood meant something. I was wrong. They met for coffee a week later. Charlotte looked older, worn down by discovering the person she'd defended was exactly as terrible as his accusers claimed. They talked for 2 hours about Michael's childhood, about the bankruptcy that had shaped him, about how fear of poverty had twisted into greed and entitlement and casual cruelty. Our father lost everything when Michael was 16, the house, the business, his reputation. Michael watched him become a shell of himself. I think Michael decided right then he'd never be vulnerable like that. He'd never let money control him. So he spent his whole life controlling money instead until it consumed him. Charlotte wiped her eyes with a napkin. That doesn't excuse what he did. It doesn't make it better. But I think I understand now why he became what he became. Understanding and forgiving are different things. I know. I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm just asking if maybe we could stay in touch. You were part of our family for 12 years. I'd like to not lose you too. Claire thought about that, about whether you could maintain a relationship with someone whose brother had tried to destroy you, about whether forgiveness required forgetting or whether people could hold space for both truth and connection. Let's start with coffee once a month, see how it goes. Charlotte nodded, grateful for the chance. 3 months after the trial, Henry's cancer accelerated. The doctors said weeks, maybe days. Claire moved into the estate full-time, set up a bedroom in the guest wing, spent every possible moment at his bedside. They talked for hours when he had energy, sat in comfortable silence when he didn't. Henry told stories about her mother, about their courtship, about the early years before money complicated everything. He told her about business deals he regretted, about people he'd hurt climbing toward success, about the exact moment he'd realized wealth couldn't buy back integrity once you'd sold it. He made Claire promise to run Sullivan Holdings differently, to build instead of destroy, to measure success in lives improved rather than competitors crushed. The foundation is yours. The company is yours. Do good things. Help people who can't help themselves. Be the person your mother and I always knew you could be. I'll try. Every day I'll try. 2 nights before the end, Henry couldn't sleep. Claire sat beside his bed reading More Frost, The Road Not Taken, because it had been Karen's favorite. Henry's breathing was labored, each inhale a battle his body was slowly losing. I'm not afraid. His words came slow, spaced between breaths. I've made my peace. With your mother. With you. With everything I've done. I'm ready. I'm glad. Claire held his hand, feeling how fragile it had become, skin like paper over bird bones. Claire, I need you to know something. These past few months being your father again, it's been the greatest gift. Thank you for giving an old man another chance. Thank you for waiting for me to be ready. Henry fell asleep holding her hand. He didn't wake up again. At 3 a.m, his breathing simply stopped. No gasping, no struggle. Just peace. Claire sat with him until dawn, watching light slowly fill the room, feeling the absence where his presence used to be. The funeral was small. Claire invited people Henry had helped over the years, scholarship recipients, employees whose families he'd supported through medical crises, charities he'd funded quietly, without demanding his name on buildings. They filled the church with stories of a complicated man who'd done terrible things early and tried to do better late, who'd understood that redemption required action, not words. Thomas gave the eulogy. He talked about loyalty and mistakes and the long road between who we are and who we want to become. He talked about Henry's love for Karen, for Claire, about how grief can poison or purify depending on what you choose to do with it. Claire cried through the whole thing, finally letting herself grieve not just for her father, but for her mother, for her marriage, for all the years lost to anger and pride and fear. Nina sat beside her, steady and present. After the service, after everyone had paid respects and drifted away, Nina drove Claire back to the estate. What are you going to do with all this? Nina gestured at the mansion, the grounds, the weight of inheritance that had just landed on Claire's shoulders. Sell most of it, keep enough for a small place, put the rest into the foundation. Claire looked out at gardens her father had maintained because her mother had loved flowers. Henry wanted me to help people. That's what I'm going to do. 1 year after the trial, Claire sat in the garden of her cottage on the outskirts of Chicago. Not the estate that had been sold to a family with 4 children who'd fill it with noise and life, just a small 3-bedroom house with a garden she could manage herself and windows that let in morning light. Biscuit dozed at her feet. The golden retriever had been at the shelter for 8 months, passed over because he was 4 years old and missing part of his left ear from a fight before the rescue found him. Claire had taken one look at him and seen a kindred spirit, scarred, older than ideal, but still capable of joy. Her phone buzzed. "Nina, brunch tomorrow? I found the most hideous bridesmaid dresses. You're going to love them." Nina was getting married next month to a physical therapist she'd met during Claire's recovery. The wedding would be small, intimate, everything Nina had always wanted. Claire was maid of honor, a role that required opinions on flowers and cake and whether champagne toast or sunset ceremony made better photos. Claire typed back, "Can't wait. Bring the ugly dresses. I have opinions." She set the phone down, picked up her coffee, watched birds move through her garden. Tulips were blooming red and yellow against green grass. The morning smelled like fresh earth and possibility. Her phone buzzed again. "Thomas. Foundation Board meeting Tuesday, 2 p.m. We're voting on the 12 scholarship recipients for fall semester. Your input would be valuable." The Sullivan Foundation had distributed $3 million in its first year. Scholarships for students whose parents couldn't afford college, legal aid for women escaping abusive marriages, medical bill assistance for families drowning in healthcare debt. Small grants that changed individual lives rather than building monuments to wealth. Claire ran the foundation part-time. The rest of her week she spent at her old job. Morrison Tech had offered her a promotion after the trial director of marketing strategy with a salary that reflected her actual value rather than her willingness to accept less. She worked 9 to 5, left on time, spent evenings walking Biscuit and reading books she'd been meaning to read for years. Her life was smaller than it used to be, quieter. She didn't miss the noise. Sometimes late at night she thought about Michael, not with anger anymore, not even with sadness. Just distant curiosity about the man she'd married, the stranger who'd worn his face, the person who'd been capable of love once before. Fear had rotted it into something unrecognizable. He was in minimum security in Pennsylvania, would be released in 18 months, assuming good behavior. Charlotte sent updates occasionally. Michael was teaching financial literacy classes to other inmates, had become involved in the prison's gardening program, claimed to be using the time to reflect on his choices. Claire didn't know if any of it was real or just another performance for an audience that might grant early release. She didn't wish him ill. She didn't wish him anything at all. He was simply someone she used to know, a chapter in a book she'd closed. Her phone buzzed a third time. Sophie from Seattle. "Just got promoted to senior finance director at a biotech startup. Thought you'd want to know I'm doing okay. Hope you are too." Claire smiled, typed back, "Congratulations, I'm proud of you." The sun climbed higher. Biscuit stretched and yawned, decided it was time for breakfast. Claire stood feeling the lingering ache in her pelvis that would probably never fully disappear, a permanent reminder of the day her old life ended and her new one began. In the kitchen, she made scrambled eggs for herself and Biscuit. She'd learned to cook properly over the past year, had taken classes at a culinary school downtown because it was something she'd always wanted to do but never made time for. Now she had time. Now she made time because if the past 2 years had taught her anything, it was that life was too short to postpone joy. After breakfast, she drove to Oaklawn Cemetery. Her parents were buried side by side, 2 granite headstones in a section shaded by old oak trees. Claire brought flowers, tulips for her mother, white roses for her father. She sat on the grass between them, talking to people who couldn't answer but somehow still felt present. "Mom, I read your letters again last week. I finally understand what you meant about forgiveness. It's not about forgetting what happened. It's not about saying the hurt didn't matter. It's about not letting the past poison the present. I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying." A breeze moved through the oak leaves, rustling them like whispered approval. "Dad, the foundation funded 12 scholarships this year. Kids whose parents can't afford tuition, who were going to skip college and work minimum wage jobs. We're changing that. You'd be proud. At least I hope you would." She stayed until afternoon shadows stretched long across the grass, then drove home. On the way, she stopped at a bookstore, bought a novel Nina had recommended. Stopped at the farmer's market, picked up fresh vegetables for dinner. Simple errands, ordinary moments, the kind of life she'd built from the ruins of the one that had burned down. That evening, Nina came over with wine and takeout Thai food. They ate on Claire's small patio, watching the sun set over her garden, talking about wedding plans and foundation work, and the new apartment Nina's fiancé had found that was big enough for both of them, plus Nina's collection of vintage medical equipment she refused to throw away. "You seem happy." Nina topped off Claire's wine glass. Actually happy, not pretending happy. Claire thought about that. "I am. For the first time in I don't know how long. Maybe for the first time ever. Is that weird? That it took losing everything to find out what actually mattered? That's not weird. That's called growth." Nina clinked her glass against Claire's. To divorce and cancer and FBI arrests and everything terrible that led to everything good. To survival. Claire sipped her wine cheaper than what Michael used to order, but infinitely better because she'd chosen it herself. They stayed up late, talking the easy conversation of people who'd known each other long enough that silence was comfortable too. When Nina left around midnight, Claire stood in her doorway watching taillights disappear down the quiet street. Her house was small. Her life was ordinary. She had a rescue dog, a garden, a job that ended at 5, and a future that belonged entirely to her. No one was going to serve her divorce papers. No one was going to steal her identity or frame her for crimes or betray her trust so profoundly that it broke something fundamental inside her. She was safe. She was free. And for the first time since the morphine drip in a hospital room 3 weeks after a drunk driver ran a red light, Claire Morrison felt like herself. The next morning she woke early. Sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, warm and golden. Biscuit was already awake, tail wagging, ready for their morning walk through the neighborhood. Claire got dressed jeans and a t-shirt, nothing fancy, comfortable clothes for an ordinary Saturday. They walked 3 miles, the route Claire had mapped out that took them past the coffee shop where teenagers worked summer jobs, past the park where families brought their children, past the library where volunteers ran reading programs for adults learning English. Her neighborhood was middle-class, diverse, full of people working hard to build stable lives. This was where she belonged. Not in Michael's world of expensive restaurants and designer suits and wealth measured in how thoroughly you could destroy the people around you. Here, where success meant paying your mortgage and saving for your kids' education and having enough left over for occasional indulgence. Back home, she made breakfast, then settled into her office, the 3rd bedroom converted to a workspace with a desk and bookshelves and a window overlooking the garden. She had foundation applications to review scholarship essays from students across Illinois, each one a story of hardship and determination and potential waiting for someone to invest in it. She read through 20 applications, taking notes, flagging the ones that made her heart ache with recognition. Kids whose parents had died. Kids escaping poverty. Kids whose talent was obvious but whose circumstances made college seem impossible. The foundation couldn't help everyone, but they could help some, and some was better than none. At noon, her phone rang. Unknown number. Claire almost didn't answer. She'd learned to be wary of unknown numbers, had received enough threatening calls during the trial to make her cautious. But something made her pick up. "Is this Claire Morrison?" A woman's voice, young, nervous. "Yes. Who's calling?" "My name is Jennifer Park. I received a Sullivan Foundation scholarship last year. I just wanted to call and say thank you. I'm finishing my first year at Northwestern, chemistry major. If it wasn't for the scholarship, I'd be working retail and taking night classes at community college. Instead, I'm here. I'm actually here. And it's because of you." Claire's throat tightened. "It's not because of me. It's because you earned it. Your essay, your grades, your determination, that was all you. Maybe. But you gave me the chance. That matters. That matters more than you know." Jennifer paused. "I'm going to graduate. I'm going to become a chemist. I'm going to do research that helps people. And someday when I can, I'm going to fund scholarships too. I'm going to pass it forward, because that's what your father did for me. That's what you're doing." They talked for 20 minutes. Jennifer told her about organic chemistry and study groups and the research lab that had accepted her as a summer intern. Claire listened, feeling something warm and fierce growing in her chest. This was why Henry had given her the foundation. Not the money itself, the ability to change lives, to create opportunities, to break cycles of poverty and limitation. When she hung up, Claire sat at her desk for a long moment just breathing. Then she called Thomas. "I want to expand the foundation, double the scholarships, add a program for legal aid and another for medical debt relief. Can we afford it?" Thomas was quiet for 3 seconds, calculating. "If we liquidate some of the real estate holdings, yes, it would require selling the commercial properties in Lincoln Park, but the return on human investment would be substantial." "Do it. Sell whatever we need to sell. I want to help as many people as possible." "Your father would approve." "I know. That's why I'm doing it." She spent the afternoon working, reviewing applications, drafting emails, coordinating with the foundation's small staff. By evening she was exhausted, but satisfied, the kind of tired that came from meaningful work rather than empty busyness. Nina texted, "Wedding dress shopping tomorrow. Prepare yourself for the most dramatic day of your life that isn't actually about you." Claire laughed, typed back, "I'll bring tissues and opinions. See you at 10. That night she sat in her garden with a glass of wine and her mother's journal. Karen had left behind 3 volumes, decades of observations about teaching and marriage and motherhood. Claire had been reading them slowly, savoring her mother's voice. Learning about the woman Karen had been before cancer made her small and gray. One entry dated 2004. "Henry asked me today why I stay with him knowing where his money comes from. I told him it's because people are more than their worst choices. He's trying to be better. That effort matters even when he fails, especially when he fails. I stay because I believe in the person he's trying to become, not just the person he's been." Claire closed the journal, thinking about her mother's capacity for forgiveness, for seeing potential in people everyone else had written off. She thought about Henry, who'd spent the last years of his life trying to undo damage he'd caused earlier. About Sophie rebuilding in Seattle. About Michael teaching financial literacy in prison, maybe learning something, maybe just performing. She didn't know if people could really change. She didn't know if Michael's regret was genuine or calculated, but she knew she'd changed. Hospital beds and divorce papers and FBI arrests had burned away the person she'd been, left someone harder and softer simultaneously. Harder in her boundaries, in her willingness to walk away from what didn't serve her. Softer in her compassion, in her understanding that people were complicated and messy and rarely just one thing. Her phone buzzed one more time. "Charlotte." "Michael called from prison today. He asked about you. Wanted to know if you were okay. I told him that was none of his business anymore. Hope that's all right." Claire smiled, typed back, "That's perfect. Thank you." She sat in her garden as dusk fell, watching fireflies appear in the gathering dark. Biscuit was curled at her feet, content and drowsy. Inside her small house waited warm and safe and entirely hers. Tomorrow she'd go wedding dress shopping with Nina. Next week she'd present scholarship awards at a ceremony for recipients and their families. Next month she'd turn 40, would celebrate with a small party in this garden with the people who actually mattered. Her life was nothing like she'd imagined at 25, standing in a church in a white dress, promising forever to a man she didn't really know. That Claire had wanted children and a big house and the kind of marriage that looked perfect in Christmas cards. She'd wanted security that came from someone else, had built her identity around being Michael Morrison's wife. This Claire wanted none of those things. She had work that mattered, friends who showed up, a dog who loved her unconditionally, and a future she controlled. She had her mother's journals and her father's legacy and the knowledge that she'd survived the worst things she could imagine and come out stronger. She thought about the divorce papers on her hospital blanket, about Michael's cold eyes as he told her to sign while medicated, about how completely her world had shattered in the space of 8 minutes. She thought about what she'd lost, marriage illusions, the person she'd been before pain taught her who she actually was. And she thought about what she'd gained. Herself, mostly. The version of herself that had always existed beneath the performance of who she thought she was supposed to be. The woman who could sit in boardrooms and demand truth. Who could forgive a dying father without forgetting why she'd been angry? Who could build something meaningful from inherited wealth instead of hoarding it like armor against a world that had hurt her? Sometimes the person we're waiting to save us is ourselves. She said it out loud, testing the words against the gathering dark. And sometimes that's exactly who we needed all along. Biscuit lifted his head, looked at her with eyes that suggested it was time for dinner. Claire laughed, stood up, despite the ache in her pelvis, walked inside to feed her dog and heat up leftovers, and live the ordinary, extraordinary life she'd fought so hard to claim. The lights of her cottage glowed warm against the night. Inside, everything she needed waited. Not everything she'd once wanted, just everything that mattered. And for Claire Morrison, that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.